Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. Lewis Hamilton finishes the Imola Grand Prix so much happier with the current state of Ferrari, saying that the Imola race was one of his best races ever, taking into account all the situations, the comeback during the Grand Prix, and of course his first race in front of the Tifosi in the red car. But are Ferrari truly back after a disastrous qualifying session? Hamilton certainly feels far more comfortable in the car after the changes they made. Will they be able to replicate that around Monaco? Especially given that, as we'll dive into, Ferrari's strategy and communication on the weekends certainly was far from ideal. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. As always, plenty to get into. It's Monaco Grand Prix weekend, one of the best weekends in all of motorsport because we have the Indy 500 and some other things as well. But it's the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. I kind of wish they were on several weekends at some point, but I know that at this point it is tradition. Speaking of the 500, by the way, you guys may recognise this man, Robert Schwartzman. He's driven a Formula 1 car in some free practice sessions a fair bit, did well in Formula 2, Formula 3, but never got the opportunity to drive a Formula 1 car. He's actually racing with Prema in IndyCar now. When it was leaked that Prema were going to go there were rumours that maybe Mick Schumacher was going to get this drive. It turned out Robert Schwartzman got the drive, and yesterday, for the first time in 41 years, stuck it on pole for the 500, his first time at an oval circuit, and the first time a rookie's done that in over 4 decades. So, honestly, unreal stuff. The 500 next weekend's going to be mega, frankly, as it always is. But let's move on, because we've got Formula 1 to talk about. This is about the Imola Grand Prix. We believe that the Imola Grand Prix we just saw may have been the final one ever, or, well, certainly for some time to come. It's believed that in the same way that Spa is moving to a rotational basis, Imola probably is going to find its way off the calendar. It's certainly not got a contract going forwards. However, there are rumours from Auto Racer that maybe Imola could find its way back on as soon as next year, only as a kind of a short-term fix, really. At the end of the day, street circuits, Miami, for example, they give more money to Formula 1, and I understand why this happens. Of course, it's unfortunate. I'm sure that many Formula 1 fans, including myself, are not exactly a massive fan of Imola disappearing in favour of a circuit like Miami. Yes, Imola, of the tracks, is it the best for racing with these modern Formula 1 cars? No. Did it produce a great race yesterday? Okay. Did it take some safety cars to make that happen? Sure, but it was very entertaining. And this is real heartland Formula 1 stuff. This is real. You think of Formula 1, you think of circuits like Imola. That's the history. That's the fan base. That's the passion, right? That's what it's all about. It's not as crazy as Monza. It's a little bit more low-key, but it's still fantastic. The rumour is, next year's Madrid Grand Prix, whatever, that disaster class of a track that we saw quite a while ago now, if there are bureaucratic reasons, which, let's be real, there might be, that are going to prevent that Grand Prix going ahead as planned for next year, look, that Grand Prix has a contract until 2035. It's going to happen, unfortunately, but it may not happen next year. They might have to delay it, and if they do, Imola might be back. That's the rumour anyway. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about Red Bull. They won the Grand Prix yesterday in very important fashion for the championship this season. Even Tsunoda had a solid comeback drive. Look, I don't want to say, wow, Yuki, what a drive. And look, he crashed it in qualifying, and, you know, he had to make a comeback to give some credit to the engineers of rebuilding the car. But, look, the car is better now. It's not like Tsunoda was driver of the day, the way that Perez was getting some DOTDs a couple of years ago. But, yeah, Tsunoda said he was pretty sleepless. And he does say he's going to try not to be a hero again. And this is the kind of thing that happens to Red Bull drivers. You drive against Max, you feel confident, you think maybe this is going to, you're going to be different to the previous teammates that Max has had. The car's very tricky, very on the nose. You maybe gain some confidence, you do okay, you get kind of close to Max. You take a bit too much risk, you go a little bit over the line, all of a sudden you crash, you spin, you end up in the wall, your confidence gets knocked. Then what do? You drive within your limits, and all of a sudden if you're driving within your limit and you're already not called Max Verstappen, you're already going to be about half a second off the pace. And yeah, this is the issue, right? Because now Yuki's going to get into this mode of trying not to, make sure he's not trying to be a hero. And I don't know, it's the same old story really, isn't it? So we'll see. The car's getting better, I think, and that's certainly going to be helping Yuki from now to the end of the season. Although he's had a difficult time, of course, in Imola, and there's a couple of Grand Prix still to come over the next couple of weekends, and Monaco is not exactly straightforward. We know what happened to Perez there last year, the first couple of corners next to Kevin Magnussen. Now, Isaac Hadjar is doing a sensational job. My prediction is that Yuki's going to get the seat for the rest of the season. But Hadjar's doing very well. He's honestly been one of the drivers of the season so far. Very consistent. Time degradation management is very solid. seems to have a good head on his shoulders as well, Hadjar, so far. Wouldn't exactly be out of the realms of possibility that Red Bull want to give Hadjar a go in that seat at some point. And if that happens, what does that mean for Yuki, right? So there's some questions there from Jacques Villeneuve and others. But the main discussion of Red Bull, of course, was the performance, right? They're back. What's going on? As we know, they brought a couple of upgrades to the Imola Grand Prix, and they were meant to be quite substantial ones combined with what they brought back in Miami. But in Miami, they brought a new floor edge, and McLaren absolutely wiped the floor with them. They turn up to Imola, and for the first time of the season, they're actually the fastest car over the entire Grand Prix. And also Verstappen would have been managing to some degree at the front, while Norris was pushing pretty hard to try and catch him up. There wasn't much difference between the lap times of those two cars. And on pure pace and pure merit, Verstappen won the Grand Prix. Now, of course, it may not have happened if he hadn't made the unbelievable overtake around the outside of Piastri. And Piastri recognised after the race that there was no way he should have let that happen. Look, as incredible as that move was for Max, and I've watched it so many times on repeat because I just find it insane how he actually pulled that off. You know, it takes two to tango, and if it wasn't for Piastri leaving the door open to that, like, you think Max was ever in a million years allowing himself to get overtaken like that? No way. Piastri knows that. He knows he's got to do better, and it was just poor execution for the McLaren guys again. And if Max had been in the dirty air, would he have been able to overtake? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. But still, it was the most pace on the day. A very different story to Miami a couple of weekends ago. So what's going on? Horner says, surprised by the fact that they lacked performance. That Grand Prix victory also confirmed Red Bull as the team with the most race wins in the 21st century. More now than Ferrari over their time since 2000. And obviously with Vettel largely, and then more recently the Verstappen era, that has definitely changed things. Mercedes have won plenty of Grand Prix, but not over such a long period to make them anywhere near this kind of graphic number, really. But with Max's win, they get to 124. Pretty remarkable stuff. Just a few words I wanted to look through here on the state of the Red Bull and why it was strong. Now, there's a few theories behind this. Red Bull was saying that actually the heat in this case was pretty good for them. Red Bull made a step with the upgrades, but McLaren are really saying that Imola as a circuit limits their potential to some degree. They think that, you know, compared to maybe Suzuka or like similar to Suzuka and Jeddah, it limits the advantage that McLaren have, is what Stella says, and it suits Red Bull more. So, like, a McLaren now the slowest car, or the second slowest car, the second fastest car behind Red Bull? No. I still think they're the quickest car on average, but this weekend was very impressive for Red Bull, and they got the setup right. The car seems to work better here. Verstappen said the car was easier to control. They made it easy to manage the tyres. That's another thing, because if you can manage the tyres better, then you don't have to worry so much about McLaren's potential rear brake duct advantage. Now, the other thing that the guys mentioned from the race yesterday I thought was pretty interesting is that this weekend we had the real soft tyres, C4, C5, C6. Those tyres, the core temperature of those tyres matters in terms of performance probably less than the surface temperature, because those real soft rubbers, they're, you know, imagine you even moving around laterally. Certainly something like the C6, although they weren't using that in the Grand Prix, but certainly the softer compounds, it's the surface temperatures that heat up more and cost performance than the core temperatures. Whereas when you have the harder compounds, it's the core temperatures that are more relevant to keeping the tyre in the right window than the surface temperatures are, because they don't heat up as easily, don't overheat as easily as the softer compounds. The conclusion of that is that if McLaren have this advantage on the rear brake duct, that mainly is going to involve the core temperatures of the tyres getting not heated up by the brakes as much as they would do otherwise on other designs. So the bottom line is, potentially, it's just a theory really, but the conclusion is that on circuits where we have a harder compound of tyres, McLaren's advantage is expected to be bigger. On weekends where we have the softer compounds, then Red Bull have a better chance. For example, in Imola, it was the softest of all the compounds. In Monaco, it's going to be the softest of all the compounds. In Spain, it's going to be the hardest of all the compounds. So Spain will be the test, right? Because if that theory has any validity behind it, McLaren will expect to win Spain, but also in Spain there's the flexi wing changes, so we don't know what that's going to do either. But Helmut Marko says the upgrades have worked to help with the tyre wear. The upgrades have made it that we now have basically same or better than McLaren in terms of tyre wear. But as I say, this might be a little bit surface level, right? Okay, you had better tyre wear or the same tyre wear as McLaren on the softest of all the compounds, but on the hardest of all the compounds, that may be a different story. So it's too early to to say that Red Bull are back, Verstappen's going to be winning every Grand Prix again. I mean, look, that's not going to be the case, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, it's too early to say that Red Bull are right there again, but I mean, this was such a massive Grand Prix win for Max in the context of the championship, given the way the standings currently are. But I will say this stat is still a thing, and, you know, McLaren fans might still be happy to see this. The remarkable thing is that Max, despite going podium, no podium, podium, no podium for the last 13 Grand Prix in a row, stretching back to last year, still won last year's championship and is still on pace to potentially do it again this year, although certainly not leading the championship right now, whereas on the other hand, Lando, Oscar have definitely scored more consistent podiums. But let us talk about Ferrari, because in many ways, they were the story of the weekends. It was Ferrari in front of the Tifosi, Hamilton driving the red car in front of the Italian fans for the first time. And in certain areas, they've been killing it this season, right? Their pit stops have been mesmerizingly good. It's kind of remarkable how Red Bull's pit stops... I mean, Jonathan Wheatley leaves for Sauber, and all of a sudden Sauber's pit stops are just as good as Red Bull's. It's actually crazy. I don't know what happened there, because I know there was talk earlier in the season that Red Bull were using a backup pit crew, but that can't be the case every weekend. So, yeah, Red Bull have fallen off. McLaren, Merc, Racing Bulls, Red Bull, Sauber, pretty similar in terms of performance. But Ferrari, almost every weekend, have had the fastest pit stop. Like, it's actually crazy. And operationally, they've cooked in that area, right? They've actually really made that work. But unfortunately, you don't win the points in the pit stops. You do sometimes win some points in the pit stops, and Hamilton's buzzing that he actually has a competent pit crew now after a couple of difficult years at Mercedes at the start of this Grand Effect era after they changed the rules. But that does not mean that Ferrari operationally are in a good spot, because before we discuss Hamilton being very satisfied with the progress on the Sunday, I did want to just run through another absolute disaster class from Ferrari on the comms. So, this was talked about a lot, and people in the replies were saying what a competent team would say, and obviously it's more difficult in the moment. But this was Charles Leclerc's onboard when the safety car comes out, and Charles asks them, we have a new soft. Like, do we have a new soft? Because at this point there was like 11, there was going to be like 11 racing laps to go after the safety car came in. May have been enough to get the C6 to the end, especially on a new one, right? So, Charles was on the radio saying, do we have a new soft? Can we run that? Now, he gets told that Hamilton doesn't want to box. Now, first of all, this is misinformation, because Hamilton was asked on the radio, what do you think about boxing for a new set of hards? And Hamilton asks, okay, how many positions will I lose? I think this was the tweet about it. Yeah, Hamilton asks, how many positions will I lose? He's told he'll lose 3 positions if he does that. And Hamilton doesn't respond. He doesn't argue against it. And the team decides, okay, this is what we're going to do. So really, Leclerc needs to be told here, okay, if we box, you'll lose this many positions. We've got a new soft. If you don't box, you'll stay here. But, obviously you're on the older hard tyres. He was told that Hamilton doesn't want to box, but actually that never happens. The communication between the pit wall just clearly wasn't there. And then Charles, understandably, is like, I don't care what Hamilton's doing. Like, what is the best for me? Do we have a new soft? He says, yes, we have a new soft. You have a new soft. And then his engineer tells him to tell him what he wants to do. So it's like, but at this point, Leclerc doesn't really have all the information. You can't be asking Leclerc, tell me now, what are we doing? Are we pitting? Are we not pitting? Like, what's going on? Given that he's just been told a second ago that Hamilton is not boxing, he then comes out the corner and sees Hamilton box. So then Leclerc thinks, well, if I box, I'm going to lose loads of time behind Hamilton in the, double stacking in the pit lane. And therefore, given it was not clear that what Ferrari were going to do, because what they were going to do is put the soft tyres on Leclerc, at this moment, that's what they decided. But in Leclerc's head, he thought Hamilton wasn't boxing because they told him that he wasn't, but actually he was. So Leclerc decides that he was going to lose too much time, so he stayed out, and then he's on the radio saying, why, I didn't pit because Hamilton pitted, so I'm not going to wait behind him and all this. So anyway, whatever, we have to stay out now. And it wasn't an absolute disaster. It's not like Leclerc lost loads of places, but again, you can see from those radio comms that again at Ferrari, it is a bit of a mess, isn't it? I mean, a bit of a mess is probably an understatement. So, again, Ferrari can take some positives. But can you imagine Ferrari were fighting for the championship though? Like, it is the same old on the radio, right? And we've had it a couple of weekends in a row now. The positive for Ferrari is that their car was much better on the Sunday. We saw it in the race pace data on the Friday, that their pace was pretty similar to the front runners, to McLaren's, Max had a difficult Friday, the car wasn't great, but, of all the cars in terms of long run pace that were similar to the McLaren's on the Friday, it was the Ferrari. It's just their quali pace isn't there, and still isn't there, and they qualied P11, P12, right? So it was a mess. But benefiting from a couple of safety cars and an opportune time, they were able to show some serious pace. And I mean, Leclerc was very fast. Hamilton was absolutely rapid. I mean, coming through the field at the ends on those fresher mediums, took Antonelli, took Russell, took Hadjar, obviously got past Albon in that controversial moment with Leclerc, got Leclerc as well. And who knows, right? Had the race been a few laps longer, Piastri was potentially vulnerable as well. So, obviously, yeah, the medium stint was good, and then he went to the hard tyres at the end and made a couple of overtakes as well. But as Hamilton says, today I felt much more at one with the car, something I'd been chasing since the sprint in China. Everything came together, the strategy, the pit stops, the balance, all worked in harmony, allowed us to recover strongly from where we were. Still work to do, especially over a lap, but if we can keep building on days like this, we will be in the mix for podiums. Thanks to the Tifosi, he says. I mean, this is Hamilton absolutely buzzing after the Grand Prix with the fans. That was kind of cool. And Hamilton went on to say tons of positives. One's the strategy, really fantastic, didn't put a foot wrong. In China I felt really aligned with the car, and then the other time was today. I felt the real synergy, the setup was great, we made an improvement in our performance, we've got to unlock the potential in qualifying. Had we qualified higher up, we'd have been fighting for a podium, something that we did not think was possible. So some room for optimism. I do find Hamilton pretty funny. Like, his memory has got to be the worst of any F1 driver. Look, I know it was a great race, but I don't think it was exactly one of Hamilton's best races as a Formula 1 driver. But I think what he means is more kind of the overall feeling of it. Okay, it wasn't even a podium in the end, but the recovery, P12 to P4, going forwards, making progress, feeling at one with the car, feeling confident, overtaking his teammate. Like, those things definitely added to the reality. But the main thing was that he was in front of the home Ferrari Italian crowd, the Tifosi, right? So, some positives to take away. Not ideal, but they brought a couple of upgrades. They brought that change to the rear brakes. The brakes were not an issue for them in the race. They were actually on fire in a good way, right? The pace was real strong. So maybe some of the changes they made for Imola are going to be good enough. Now, Monaco, who knows? We're a few days away. And Charles Leclerc is... Look, let's be real. He's a few years further in. He's had this phase of the disappointment phase and the excitement and the optimism phase. But Charles Leclerc's side of the garage, of course, he had a worse result than Hamilton, so he's going to be frustrated. But he does come out and say, look, this is unacceptable where we currently are. I cannot accept it compared to especially where they were last year. So while Hamilton will be optimistic, certainly Charles Leclerc is like, look, we need to make some serious progress, because at the end of the day, this is the Constructors' Championship. It is not exactly pretty. McLaren at 279, Mercedes at 147, Red Bull now 131, and Ferrari at 114. So, look, they're going to beat Williams in the Constructors, right? So, yeah, I mean, they extended the gap this weekend, but it's still not ideal, and Charles Leclerc is 5th and Hamilton's 6th in the championship, right? So, look, maybe if Mercedes keep having a difficult time, they can make some progress, but the fight for the championship, of course, as we know, is well and truly over, and has been for a very long time. So very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.